Who doesn't love a good flying story? Peter Pan, Superman, Harry Potter on a broomstick? Flying is inherently exciting because it allows us to transcend our limits and be free of gravity's chains. Yet few stories capture the wonder of flight like that of Daedalus and Icarus. In this classic Greek myth, two inventors dared to take to the skies only for one of them to pay a heavy price for hubris. So let's get into it. In ancient Greece, no craftsman was more renowned than Daedalus. His workshop was filled with incredible contraptions, from chariots pulled by 4 horses abreast to catapults that hurled boulders across battlements. But it was his skill and deception that made him most famous. When King Minos of Crete demanded he build a labyrinth so complex that Theseus would forever lose his way within it, Daedalus rose to the challenge. But once he completed the structure, he found himself trapped inside, along with the monstrous Minotaur, an enormous creature with the head of a bull and the body of a man, who served as a grim reminder of Minos' transgressions against the gods. Desperate to escape, Daedalus took advantage of a visiting delegation to hide in a large basket covered in pitch. He snuck out of the labyrinth and onto the ship without anyone noticing. Then, when the coast was clear, he made his move. Seizing the oars, he rowed away from Crete, finally reaching the shores of Athens, where he was warmly received. But King Minos wasn't happy about losing his greatest craftsman. Enraged, he sent a detachment of soldiers to bring Daedalus back to him, dead or alive. And fearing for his life, Daedalus did the unthinkable. He hid in a hollow bronze statue of the god Mercury until the soldiers left. Then he made his way to a hidden cave on the north coast of Athens. There he constructed another contraption, a wooden chariot that would serve as a kind of glider, which he attached to a pair of tame vultures to give it mobility. Strapping himself into the chariot, he then leaped off the cliff and glided down toward the sea. But unfortunately, he had miscalculated the distance to the water and wound up crashing into the rocks below. Luckily, he was able to free himself from the wreckage and stagger back to his workshop, where he promptly locked himself inside. Knocking at the door, King Minos demanded that Daedalus come out so they could settle their differences man to man. But when Daedalus refused, Minos ordered his men to nail the door shut and set it on fire. With no other choice, Daedalus leapt through the window and ran for the hills. He stumbled upon a cave where a group of boys were playing with stones. Not wanting to scare them, he disguised himself with leaves and branches and told them he was a dryad, a spirit of the woods. Impressed by his ability to shape-shift, the boys agreed to lead him to their teacher, an old man named Caution. Caution, however, wasn't so easily convinced and demanded that Daedalus perform an even greater trick, turning a lump of lead into a beautiful bronze statue. Now normally, this wouldn't have been a problem for a master craftsman like Daedalus. But how could he possibly complete such a task with all the tools in King Minos' possession? Just then, one of Caution's students suggested that Daedalus use the lead to create a bird statue instead, and though it went against his better judgment, Caution agreed. After finishing the statue, Daedalus told the boys that if they ever saw a stranger carrying around a similar-looking statue, they should do whatever he said without asking questions. Then, leaving the cave, he fashioned wings for himself using feathers and wax, and taking off from the highest peak in Athens, he flew as far as he could until he landed in Sicily. Here he met King Hylas, who showered him with gifts and asked him to create a pair of wings so he could fly around his kingdom. And while Daedalus was flattered, he knew that he couldn't risk giving King Minos the knowledge needed to make wings. So instead he instructed Celus's son, Icarus, to gather some feathers and wax, and tried to convince the king that it was too dangerous for him to attempt flight. But Hylas wouldn't listen, and after watching his father strap on the wings and take off, Icarus decided to follow suit. As they soared through the air, Icarus turned to his father and shouted, "Oh, Dad, let's see how fast we can go," before diving toward the ground. Daedalus quickly grabbed his son's cloak and yanked him out of his death dive, shouting, "Icarus, my son, fly neither too low nor too high. Fly neither too low nor too high." With these words of warning echoing in his ears, Icarus promised to be more careful, and the two continued on their journey. Eventually, they reached the coast of Sicily, where King Hylas waited for their arrival. But as soon as he saw his father's wings, he ordered his guards to seize them and take them back to Athens to receive their reward. However, when Daedalus heard what had happened, he knew that there was only one thing to do. He found Icarus and told him to gather some feathers and wax and get ready for another flight. As soon as the sun began to rise, they strapped on their wings and began to climb. Higher and higher they went, eventually reaching an altitude of 7,000 cubits. At this point, Icarus began to feel the heat of the sun, and assuming that his father must be feeling it too, he suggested that they descend a little. But Daedalus begged him to stay where he was, warning that the sun would scorch their wings if they got any closer. Icarus, however, didn't listen and began to glide lower and lower. Sure enough, the feathers and wax of his wings immediately caught fire, and the hot wax began to melt, causing Icarus to plummet earthward. As onlookers watched in horror, Icarus struggled to steer his flaming wings, but it was no use. He fell into the sea, where he was quickly swallowed by the waves and drowned. Meanwhile, Daedalus continued to fly until he reached a small island south of Sicily, where he built a tomb for his son and gave him a proper burial. Overcome with grief, he spent the rest of his days crafting small models of airplanes that he released into the sky as a way of honoring his son and the freedom that flight represented. The story of Daedalus and Icarus serves as an important reminder about the dangers of hubris. Despite his many talents, it was Daedalus's arrogance that ultimately led to his downfall. In his haste to escape King Minos, he abandoned everything that made him a great craftsman: his tools, his materials, and even his reputation. This caused him to suffer greatly, both physically and emotionally. Furthermore, Daedalus's decision to make wings for King Hylas was a grave mistake. Despite the risks involved, he was unable to resist the temptation to show off his skills, and the results were disastrous. His warning to Icarus, "Fly neither too low nor too high," is an important lesson for all of us. It teaches us not to be overconfident in our abilities and to respect the limits that are placed on us. Icarus's decision to ignore this advice and fly too close to the sun resulted in his death. This is a powerful reminder that those who are overly ambitious and don't know when to scale back often wind up paying a heavy price for it. The story of Daedalus and Icarus has been retold countless times throughout history, but its lessons are just as relevant today as they were in ancient Greece. In our modern world, we are constantly being bombarded with messages about how we can achieve greatness. We are told to reach for the stars and never settle for second best. But this can lead to a false sense of confidence and cause us to take risks that we are unprepared for. For example, in the early 1900s, a new form of transportation was invented: the airplane. People were amazed by the possibilities that this new technology offered, and many were eager to take to the skies. However, not everyone was as skilled a pilot as the Wright brothers or other early aviation pioneers. And as a result, many accidents occurred. One of the most famous of these accidents was the crash of the Hindenburg in 1937. This disaster killed 35 people and shocked the world. It was a stark reminder of the dangers of hubris and the importance of knowing one's limits. The story of Daedalus and Icarus reminds us that true greatness comes not from those who are overly ambitious, but from those who are wise and humble enough to know their limitations. No matter how talented or gifted we may be, if we are not careful, we can easily fall victim to our own hubris and wind up paying a heavy price for it. So what's the moral of the story? Don't reach too high. Stay grounded in reality and always remember to respect the limits that are placed on you. If you do, you will not only avoid the pain and suffering that comes with failure, but you will also be able to achieve true greatness. That's all for now, but please don't forget to leave a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video and subscribe to watch more content. Thanks, and see you next time.